Good afternoon. I'm Becky Kapp, and we're here to talk with some of our leading experts in cell and gene therapy about the balance between centralized and decentralized manufacturing in this space. We've moved to a point in the industry where we're adding on to the excitement about the science and the capability to get manufacturing done. And now we're looking at how do we deploy these therapies in the field so that we can get to accessibility for a wide range of patients. So I'm excited to start the conversation with our friends Carol and Claudia and Vera. So to kick us off, Claudia, could you talk to us a little bit about where you see centralized and decentralized manufacturing? Is that a spectrum? Is it a choice, one or the other? How does that work?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this panel with me. I think that it's a great conversation to keep having. We've been having it for quite some time, but the more you talk about it, the more sinks in. And the truth is, it depends a little bit on the cell therapy type. I truly believe that for accessibility, we need to think about the concept of decentralization. It's something that is been in the mind of many manufacturers and tool providers to create automated system, to create spaces that these therapies can be deployed. The idea is that we need to have accessibility. Patients need to access that. Sometimes centralized and cryopreservation and the logistics works well, and others, perhaps you need to be closer to the patient. So we need to understand that because we have a big menu of therapies right now in the space, we can pick and choose the right model for the right cell therapy and go with it,
Yeah,
embrace it and go with it.
I like that. Vera, you had some thoughts on this
Yes.
earlier.
And I agree, the accessibility is still not where we want or where everybody wants it to be. If you speak in a small indications and only 20% have access, there is something that we can do better. But then where do we start? And we were speaking before about, can that be a mixed model? So where do we start with the decentralization and bringing that therapy more accessible, more closer to the patient? Is it at the start upstream, where we organize the apheresis more closer to the patient? Or are we looking first at the manufacturing? So, or is it sequential? Do we do it together? So I think that are certainly things that we also need to discuss. As there are many barriers, can we solve it all at the same time?
Great question. Now, Carol, you've been doing a lot in this space. What do you think?
Well, we had a lot of dialogue in our roundtable earlier about like where do you start? Like which centers, if you're going to do point of care, what centers should we try to support in developing further their point of care model? And we talked a lot about, it should be those hospitals that already maybe have transplant programs that are already doing some work now. How can we bolster them so that they can then become the experts in a region that then bring in maybe more community-based centers? How do we do that? And then we can start to really deploy infrastructure around it. I think we got to something there. I think that is a great place to start and start looking at how we can grow this beyond just a few academic centers. It doesn't improve the accessibility if there's only one hospital in, the three different states. It's not, it's not helping the situation there.
Yeah, moving from an academic center to your community hospital that doesn't see a lot, doesn't even see bone marrow transplant, it's a big leap.
It is.
And if we can take smaller steps that push the community, that push the therapeutic availability out.
Yeah,
I
I
think that's
absolutely
exciting.
love what CERM is doing in the state of California. A couple of years ago, they had a grant that went out that established the alpha clinics, and you've got 9 alpha clinics in the state. Clinics like Stanford, UC Davis, City of Hope, fantastic institutions. And then the next grant this year that came out was all about taking that knowledge and disseminating it into the communities. So now you've got these pillars that are like institutions that can, it's a fantastic model, and it's one that I keep promoting because I think it's something we can learn from, and it's probably a model that can be done across the country and around the world, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think this is something where you touch base is the education. I heard from a patient, a CAR T survivor, that even oncologists sometimes are against those new therapies because they are not familiar with it, so they stay with what they know. So how can you then go to a community center, even if you focus on providing mobile apheresis, if they are not comfortable then to treat that patient?
Well, that is one of the points for this conversation. We have to have physicians and hospitals to include them in this learning curve, because if they come from the very beginning with us, they learn with us and we learn from them how to do it.
The one thing I loved about this latest grant that happened in 24, just last year, was not only did you establish a center in the community, but you literally established the community, the referral networks, the patient support. You had to, as part of the grant, address that. And I think that's one piece that we're missing. If you don't have even the primary care and other supporting healthcare contributors and at least knowledgeable, you're going to have patient recruitment problems. You're going to have patient follow-up problems. So
I love that because it's beginning with the end in mind. They know where they want to go, and they're backing it up and say, okay, well, what's the next step we do? What's the next step we do? So with that in mind, and we're veering sharply down the path of how do we get to decentralized? Because let's be honest, I think we all agree there's a role for centralized manufacturing for certain cell types, and we have models for that. So how do we add on to get to a decentralized model for those products that need to be closer to the patient? In our roundtable earlier, there was a lot of discussion about the barriers. And Claudia, the hospitals, we do need hospitals at the table for this conversation. But there were so many issues in terms of, what was it, getting the right workforce, getting the right regulatory framework and challenges around compliance there. The cost when aligning those manufacturing models with patient outcomes. Are we actually going to be able to reduce the cost when we get closer to the patient? Because how much infrastructure are we going to have to build all over the country, right? All of those questions. If you had to pick one that we could work on today to make progress, what would be the first one you would tackle?
I would tackle digital infrastructure. And I know that this is quite important because it's the way to talk to each other in the different locations. If you are decentralized, you need to make sure that you have the right infrastructure to talk to each other and compare and be able to be live and on time doing the treatments at the same time that the centralized place takes care of other things. So talking to each other, all those different centers, it's just something that it's a low-hanging fruit because it's being done today by different digital applications. But now in an era of AI and machine learning that we talk a lot about, we need to create more data so we can create more efficiencies, and it's something that is easy. The regulatory agency needs to upgrade their technology access, and the sponsors as well, and the hospital as well. So if everybody can talk the same language and share moment on time, on the real time, it's going to be a very interesting thing. And it's something that it's, for my point of view, it's a low-hanging fruit. Perhaps are more down the line are more other low-hanging fruits, but it's something that it's right now at our hands.
Yeah, and it comes back to making sure that you can prove that you have consistency and predictability, because that's where regulatory authorities are looking for. So if you have those data, you connect everything, then you can do that. If you have an automated process and a very well-described procedure how to do, then we can get there. And you were speaking about infrastructure. If we need to repeat infrastructure for every other treatment, every other therapy, I think cost will become an issue. But if you can have this predictability and standardization across the different therapies, then you can do that at the same infrastructure. That's some of the thoughts I have.
Fascinating.
For us in our partnership with Caring Cross, the beauty of it is that the Caring Cross team brought the asset, the clinical asset, so CAR T, triple CAR. They brought the process by which to produce it, an understanding of the equipment and the model, and the idea about how would you deploy that around the world? How would you take that? And then we took it and wrapped a facility around it. Like, how do we have a facility that someone can actually operate this process? And the beauty of that is then you can standardize, bring that into a digital platform, and then you can scale it. You can, and then you have all the monitoring. So we're learning a lot in putting that together, and there'll be more to come on that. We're deploying that soon.
I think that it's important to note that yesterday there was a big announcement between Oracle, OpenAI, and SoftBank to create a fund of about $500 billion only for healthcare. And so I think that it's a moment for these therapies to find a way to be alive and up there.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking about the software implementations that I've done, Claudia, and I'm like, that's the low hanging fruit. But
Once it's done, once it's done, it's
the effort to value ratio perhaps might make it the one to tackle.
no, but I think we have more experience as we grow.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a really good point, and thinking through, it's not going to be one thing, right?
No.
It's not going to be one thing, but I think the conversation, because you each mentioned that we've been having this conversation for a while, and I think part of the problem is everybody gets overwhelmed by the number of barriers, the number of challenges we need to address, and so how do you break it down, right? So what's the first thing you tackle? And where do you go to find the people who can help you tackle each of those issues? Um, what do you think? This is a big one, but what do you think about the role that we could play in shaping the regulatory space? How do we do that?
The FDA has been very open.
Yeah, the agency's been quite open. As a matter of fact, if I put my hat of standard coordinating body, has been an organization that was created under the auspices of the FDA to help the industry on areas that perhaps FDA was too overwhelmed. They were already overwhelmed trying to understand the new concept of these advanced therapies. So the standard coordinating body created an organization that helps standardize the industry. And I think that's been almost 10 years, a little bit or less, that it's been around. And I think that it's creating that critical mass of standardization that is needed for the automation to happen, for the deployment of these therapies to happen globally. And now what is needed is more a harmonization on the global level, because each regulatory agency in every part of the world works different. So I think that it's a matter now of talking about harmonization. As a matter of fact, blood did harmonization with IHC or HCH or something like that. They did an harmonization of the blood-related products globally. Why not for cell therapy?
And I think to come then to you as a standardization committee, I think it's important that as an industry, you are working together and that we are forming groups and that we align on what is needed to bring that standardization and what is needed that we measure, in what way are we measuring, and that we have an alignment on that. So I think bringing industries, the different players together is what I think, what we try to do and play as a company, because as a company alone, we are not going to get there. We need to do it together.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's why the technology, when we talk about AI and data and big data and data sharing, if the industry doesn't come together pre-competitively and create value for the rest of the industry to grow, you're not going anywhere, and nobody's going anywhere.
So what are the big surprises that you had from the conversation today? Anything?
I think it will require courage to start somewhere, because we already want to paint a picture, see where we are getting to, what's the model going to be, but there will be some learning as we go. So how are we going to set that first step? That's not clear. We are talking and talking, but now how do we put our toe into the water? So that's a surprise that we continue to talk, but we are not getting to something very practical and start. Well, there are examples that they are done, but how do we take then the next one as well?
It's almost like we need a checklist.
Okay, so what do you think is next for this conversation? How do we make this actionable?
I don't know. We have all the pieces. It's someone to coordinate all
We need a
this.
quarterback.
Yeah, we need a coordination because we have pretty much a lot of elements. We have a lot of organizations in the space. I think that even ARM is also a very industry-oriented organization that is trying to make sure that we are there for the industry. So I don't know. I think that we have the pieces. It's going to take more conversation with the end, which is the hospital and the physicians, because those are your sales force.
Right.
And so if you want to, at the end of the day, have the access, have the reimbursement, you need to show that these therapies, you are big enough and adult enough to deploy them properly. And when that happens, the reimbursement will start to look at you at a different pair of eyes. But I know that there are a lot of challenges ahead. They're not easy, but this industry has been made of risk takers.
Yeah.
I have
Or we work with a few people on a proof of concept. And then we can start to see what is the value prop. And with that value prop, we can scale and bring it to a larger group of cell therapy developers.
I was talking to one of my team members about this earlier today, and this concept of, we're in a position where we're talking to the hospitals, they're our customers. We're talking to pharma, they're our customers. Bring those conversations together. Now, when you say it in that broad generality, that sounds like nice pie in the sky, but could we pick a hospital and a pharma customer and a group of industry partners and bring a microcosm together?
Yeah, like CERM did, like a small
Exactly. Exactly.
first level project. You check and balance, do all right, validate, move to the next level.
And we did a great project, not in the cell therapy space, but it was addressing drug shortages. And we worked very carefully with a company called the On Demand Pharma. And they do essentially point of care compounding, or they could fall under 503B. So it's still FDA regulated. We came together, we provided the infrastructures, really great technology so that you could oversee all the activities going on at the point of care where this manufacturing essentially of core drugs that were shorted would be going on. We partnered with a hospital called North Mississippi Medical Center. So, an area where there's a lot of need, and there was a absolutely visionary CEO that was lots of great executive team that want to do bold things. And then we executed a proof of concept period of time where we ended up producing 12,000 doses. And then the beauty of that is once you complete something like that, you can then look back. Okay, what went well? Where do we still have some technology challenges? And that's really what we need to replicate in cell therapy space. Something like that.
Pilot, because it's rich enough data. That's on an N of 3.
Well, and the beauty of it was the FDA toured it, boards of pharmacy toured it, they had, so we got a lot of knowledge sharing and a lot of inviting regulators in to actually understand the core problem we were trying to solve, and then also the technology we could bring to meet all the regulatory requirements. So it's like that.
Creating a demonstration project, and I mean, you've said it, Verla. Just find something small that we can do together. But how do you measure small, right?
Yeah.
And
And also what I hear in your example, there was a kind of urgency.
Oh, yes.
So where is the urgency? Because then you're able to mobilize more quicker.
this is enough.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And bringing together a group of people that really do want to see change and will innovate and bring some bravery to making that change happen.
No, the innovation together with a flexible regulatory agency, it's going to be an interesting combo because we've been building like closed systems for the raw materials, automation, closing a little bit. So we've been working as an industry slowly getting there. I think that the manufacturing is an area that we've been quite heavily invested a lot. Now let's look at the big picture, at the acquisition of the patient, acquisition of those cells, characterize them, and look into the data that we can share as an industry, because each at the end of the day company can maybe deploy 500 therapies, 1,000 therapies, and that is not enough critical mass to create data to improve those products, to improve those processes. So perhaps we can look into the industry. And I know there's been a conversation for a while on data sharing, anonymous data sharing, so we can create value. To
I think
all of
that's a
us.
great. I think that's a great point. We've been talking about translating. There's a program that we've done called the REDS study in blood banking. It's with red cells. It's vein to vein. It's looking at all these different characteristics. Like, guys, we've got to translate that to cell and gene. I was just talking to someone else who's. So I think there's momentum around that. But I really appreciate the conversation today and your comments, Claudia, about the technology and the infrastructure and how all of that's coming together in an automated way with the data. It almost starts to address the concerns that we heard about having the right level of professional at the bedside or in a decentralized model. Some of those workforce issues. So I think we are onto something, and I'm excited to see where this group takes the next step. So thank you for the conversation this afternoon. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim.